Morning. Good morning. Hello. We are just starting the webinar. So let's wait a few more beats for participants to join. If I could remind our EDJCC committee members, council members, invited guests, if you haven't already, could you please rename yourself? Right now, your name display says EDJCC panelist. So we'd like to know who has joined us today. If you could hover over your three dots and rename yourself, that would be great. Thank you. Also, if I can remind everyone to mute themselves, that will be helpful. All right. I think we are, everybody's in. Let's get started. Good morning. My name is Carol DeAndres, and I am the Stakeholder and Public Engagement Manager on the Master Plan for Aging team here at the California Department of Aging. And this is the first meeting of the California Elder Disability and Justice Coordinating Council, or EDJCC. Today is February 8th, 2024. This is the first meeting of EDJCC for 2024. So welcome. And I am going to, as my colleagues have heard numerous times, but this is the first time with you. Happy New Year. Next slide. I'm going to go over a few logistics for you as we engage in this virtual meeting. We have live captioning available through your Zoom webinar functions. We have ASL interpreters provided. Thank you, Tulip, and your colleague, which we will see momentarily. Meeting slides and the transcript and the recording can be found on our California Health and Human Services Master Plan for Aging webpage, the EDJCC page. And committee members, I have asked committee members and guests that will be presenting, if I could remind you to update your name display in Zoom by right-clicking in the upper corner of your video and selecting rename, so we know who has joined us. Next slide. A few virtual meeting operations, please. The chat function, pardon me. The chat function is enabled for committee members, California Department of Aging staff, and other invited guests to share meeting-related resources, information with each other and attendees. The public will be able to view the content in the chat. The chat and the question and answer functions are not enabled for public use, but we do have public comment at the end of the meeting. Towards the end of the meeting, we will see it in the agenda. And so we invite you to hold your comments until that time. And of course, you can always submit public comments to our email box at any time, which is engage, ENGAGE @aging.ca.gov. Next slide, please. These are the logistics for public comment. Attendees joining by phone, you may press *9 on your dial pad, and we will unmute your line. And attendees joining via the webinar, Zoom webinar function, you can click the raised hand button to join the queue, and we'll unmute your line for your public comment time. Do want to remind you that public commenters have 2 minutes so that we can make sure we hear from everyone. And again, as always, you may submit public comments at any time via our email box, engage@aging.ca.gov. Next slide. So I'm going to spotlight my colleague. Rosanna, I can't find you. There you are. There's add spotlight. There you go. Good morning. I'm going to turn it over to you. Please introduce yourself.
Thanks, Carol. My name is Ranjana Maharaj, and I have the privilege of serving as the Elder Justice Specialist for California Department of Aging. It's truly an honor to be here with all of you today as we gather here to discuss and address critical issues surrounding elder justice in our state. And before we delve into our agenda items, I'd like to take a moment to revisit the council purpose and equity guiding principles. So I'll be reading them to you. The council purpose: the goal of the Elder and Disability Justice Coordinating Council is to increase coordination and develop recommendations to prevent and address the abuse, neglect, exploitation, and fraud perpetrated against older adults and adults with disabilities. Next slide, please. Equity guiding principles. We recognize that past, current interventions and services prevent mistreatment have had a negative consequence for some victims, families, and communities as a result of systemic discrimination and biases. To counter these negative impacts and to ensure equity and inclusion moving forward, we are committed to letting the following principles guide all aspects of our work, planning, coordination, and program development. Next slide, please. 1, we recognize that adults deserve to live free from abuse, neglect, and exploitation. 2, we acknowledge the existence of systemic racism, discrimination, and negative impacts. In order to combat its impacts, we must center equity at all stages of our council's work. 3, centering around equity does not just mean creating equitable solutions for all older adults and adults living with disabilities, but also recognizing that implicit bias exists within all of us. We are committed as a group to acknowledge and explore biases while doing the work of this council. 4, we acknowledge that while older adults and adults living with disabilities have many overlapping interests, they are distinct communities, and any policies that are observed or recommended by this council should examine impacts for each community. 5, we recognize the importance of hearing directly from older adults. And adults living with disabilities. Their lived experiences should always be centered as we move forward with the work of this council. Our council serves as a platform for collaboration, innovation, and collective action, and we're here to amplify the voices of older adults and adults with disabilities, address systemic challenges, and safeguard their rights. With this purpose in mind, let us proceed with the next slide. Next 2 slides, and the next 2 slides will show our council members. And we'd like to take a moment to express our gratitude to each and every member and non-member of the Elder and Disability Justice Coordinating Council. Your commitment, dedication, and active participation in discussions and subcommittee work exemplifies collaboration and advocacy. Next slide, please, to display the next set of members. Okay. For today's agenda, we'll start with welcome and opening remarks, followed by ongoing work and initiatives of the Elder and Disability Justice Coordinating Council subcommittees. We will also have a 10-minute break, and as we return from break, we have our first presentation on Prepare for Your Care, followed by updates and overview from the Division of Medi-Cal Fraud and Elder Abuse, and finally closing with public comments and next steps. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our California Department of Aging Director, Director Susan DeMorris.
Thank you very much, Ranjana, and good morning to everyone joining us today, to all of our members who are returning, and a very special warm welcome to our new EDJCC members who are joining us. I want to specially thank Bertha Hayden, Directing Attorney at Bet Zedek, who is our new stakeholder co-chair. So thank you, Bertha, for all of your work leading up to today, and more work ahead for you as the stakeholder co-chair. This group is our youngest stakeholder group at just 2 years old, and I'm just astounded by the progress that's been made in 2 short years with this council. And the credit goes to all of you who are joining as members, members of the public who are joining, and to our CDA staff. It's just remarkable what we've been able to achieve in a short time. And I really want to lift up our work group chairs who have been meeting and pushing the work forward between meetings. That is so important. And we really appreciate your advocacy and your subject matter expertise. So we welcome the new members and look forward to your contributions to the group and your feedback. I think we're going to move to the next slide. It is, as young as our group is, it's just heartbreaking that we today will remember one of our founding members, Howard McBroom. Just heartbreaking that Howard passed away. This picture just reminds me, I have such fond memories of Howard being the first in the Zoom room, chit-chatting before meetings, and just the enthusiasm and passion and eagerness that he brought to this group as one of our most active and dedicated members, and his encouragement of the many initiatives that we were prioritizing and beginning work on. And it's not just in the Elder and Disability Justice Coordinating Council where Howard made his impact. He was a fierce advocate for people with disabilities, and he led many organizations and efforts during his lifetime. So I'm just going to take a moment here for all of us to remember Howard, and we'll just be silent for just a moment here. Thank you. He will be missed. He will be missed, and we will honor him with the work we do today and the work ahead in 2024. Our next slide will share with all of you, for those of you who are returning, you may recall that 2 years ago, or a year and a half, well, it would have been a year, I don't know. We are on a sequence where every 2 years we hold a day of action, and this is when all of our stakeholder committees come together. All of our advocates join with partners in local, state, and federal government to advance the next round of Master Plan for Aging initiatives. So you all will be critical to that, and the work we discussed today and in the next couple of months will shape your recommendations as a council that we will take forward to our day of action in October. So you are all invited, you are all included, and you will be presenting your priority recommendations on Tuesday, October 8th. So more to come on that, but we're very excited about what is ahead as we continue to move in these 2-year increments in our 10-year blueprint. Next slide. Okay, so I believe and I also want to acknowledge we are conflicting today with another important webinar that closely relates to our work here. The Administration for Community Living released a final rule on the Older Americans Act earlier this week, and they are holding a webinar today. As this work unfolds, we'll be closely following it, and we'll keep you apprised, and we welcome your thoughts as well on the update to the Older Americans Act. And now I turn the agenda back over to Ranjana. Thank you.
Thank you, Director DeMorris. I would like to next introduce our esteemed subcommittee chairs who play a pivotal role in advancing the mission of our council and addressing critical issues in elder and disability justice. But before I do that, I do have a note from Jim Tregari, who will be stepping back from the subcommittee to ensure clarity and roles for stakeholders and the state. Jim will remain an active and engaged member of the Elder and Disability Justice Coordinating Council, and we look forward to the APS subcommittee's bold thinking that helps the state identify opportunities for continued program advancement and innovation in alignment with the Elder and Disability Justice Coordinating Council. So thank you, Jim, for your role in supporting EDJCC. First, we have Vivian Mabaku, the Equity Director of Justice and Aging for our Legal Services Chair, presenting for the Legal Services Subcommittee. Vivian?
Thanks, Ranjana. Next slide. So as Ranjana said, I am the chair for the Legal Services Subcommittee, and I wanted to just touch on our subcommittee's mission statement. And what we're really focusing on is to ensure that every older adult in California has access to comprehensive and reliable legal services, making sure that we empower older adults and adults with disabilities to protect their rights and maintain independence and lead fulfilling lives with dignity. Creating a centralized information hub for legal services resources, identifying gaps, creating best practices and making recommendations, identifying resources, including funding opportunities to enhance legal services, emphasizing elder justice and the master plan for aging, and finally, providing recommendations to the legislature that create an ongoing funding opportunity that does not limit resources for legal services. Next slide. So today I'm going to briefly go over our legal services work group priorities for the year 2024. And these kind of, mesh well with the mission statement that I just read. First, we have increased funding for legal services. As a group, we have discussed that we are really trying to find ways to promote existing funding resources that legal services organizations might not already be utilizing, and also finding new funding for legal services, which we know, like a lot of social services, are chronically underfunded. And then finally, promoting the newly created Loan Repayment Assistance Program. This is a program where legal services organizations can use IOLTA funds. IOLTA is the interest that's earned on funds that are in a lawyer trust account. Generally, these funds go to the, oh, sorry. Okay, it looks like there are some issues hearing me. Generally, these funds go to serve legal services organizations, and many legal services organizations receive this funding from the California Bar. And there is a new program that can be used to assist legal services attorneys in helping pay their student loans. If you've watched the news in the last few years, you're well aware of the student loan crisis, and it's particularly acute for attorneys, as they tend to have accrued hundreds of thousands of dollars of loans once they finish law school. The second is estate planning. So estate planning used to be under the purview of our conservatorship work group, but now legal services work group is going to take on estate planning. And in contrast to the conservatorship work group, we're focusing on expanding legal services abilities to provide full representation in estate planning services. And we're really looking at addressing the barriers. Why are legal services organizations not able to provide this full representation? Why are they more so focusing on quick representation or clinic type advice? And looking at ways that we can get more funding and uplifting models that are already doing this full representation. And then finally, the civil criminal law collaboration. So we did have at our last legal services work group meeting a really robust conversation about the ways that civil legal aid and prosecutors can collaborate. In particular, looking at restorative justice and other alternatives to prosecution in elder abuse and exploitation cases, and then also creating stronger referral links between prosecutors and legal services organizations, so that when there potentially are cases where the prosecutors cannot pursue criminal charges, making sure that those victims are able to get some kind of civil representation and potentially pursue whatever happened in civil court. Thank you.
Thank you, Vivian. Does anyone have any questions for the Legal Services Work Group Chair? No worries. We can also save questions for after everyone's provided their updates to their priorities. Next, we have Achilles Cerrone, Director of the San Francisco Human Services Agency, as our new Adult Protective Services Chair. Welcome, Achilles.
Hi, welcome. Just a correction. I'm the Program Director of Adult Protective Services within the Human Services Agency. Thank you. So I'll be stepping in as the chair of the Adult Protective Services Subcommittee. And what is next is what we have worked on so far. Next slide, please. This subcommittee, as the other subcommittees, were part of the Master Plan on Aging, Elder Justice Coordinating Council, and we aim to center equity and formulate strategies to ensure that every older adult and adult with disabilities in California receives a timely response to reports of abuse, neglect, self-neglect, and exploitation by Adult Protective Services and the agencies designated by the state to receive and respond to cross reports, and to ensure effective coordination of interagency interventions, remedies, and treatment strategies to abuse, neglect, self-neglect, and exploitation, and to support the well-being, liberty, and independence of older adults and adults with disabilities, and the protection of their real and personal property. Next slide, please. Or priorities, we have come up with the top 2 priorities, and we'll explore the third one. Our first priority is to ensure that every older adult and adult with disabilities receives a timely response to reports of abuse, as defined at the agencies that are designated by the state to receive these reports, that they receive these reports on a timely manner. What we have done, we have reviewed a lot of what the current code in California requires in terms of other interagency coordination, collaboration, and involvement to respond to reports of suspected abuse in different jurisdictions, in different settings, whether it is a licensed facility, out in the community, a hospital, you name it. And what are the agencies that need to be more immediately involved, and how can they receive these reports in a timely and consistent manner? So we will be exploring ways in which these reports can be received in some regional or wider level, so that on the front end, the appropriate cross reports can be made and the appropriate agencies can respond more timely, including the main agencies identified by the state, such as Adult Protective Services, local law enforcement, and the long-term care ombudsman. Our second priority is to look at ways in which the elder justice experts can support local law enforcement jurisdictions with respect to receiving and responding to these reports. It doesn't matter the setting, whether it's a licensed facility or not, within their jurisdiction, so that these responses can be timely and effective, again, to help protect the person, the well-being of the older adult, the adult with a disability who is believed to be in harm's way, and their property. And our likely third priority is to look more closely at these multidisciplinary team interagency interventions. What are the collaborations that are currently facilitated in code by the state of California that perhaps we need to review to ensure that we are maximizing their use, and looking at any barriers that may be preventing multiple agencies from ensuring a more timely response and coordination of interventions to ensure that people are well and free from harm. Thank you, Regina.
Thank you, Achilles. Just a friendly reminder for our EDJCC panelists to change their name display or say hello. If you need help, please raise your hand and let us know. Carol will go ahead and rename you. Next on the agenda, we have our chair, Bertha Hayden, directing attorney with Bet Zedek, who is our conservatorship chair. Bertha?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. And I hope that we have a vigorous conversation. I remember our last meeting, Howard would always have a unique point of view and involving all of us to discuss how we can further collaborate and improve matters. So I'm presenting the conservatorship subcommittee or update. And as we transition to the next slide, I also want to share our mission statement and what we're grounding our work in. The conservatorship work group is operating within the Elder and Disability Justice Coordinating Council as part of the Master Plan on Aging. We also aim to center and equity and formulate strategies to educate the general public and professionals who work with older adults and adults living with disabilities about probate conservatorships and other decision-making tools, such as our supported decision-making, advanced health care directives. We also aim to identify current data source and make recommendations, how to streamline and centralize data collection for probate conservatorships. We further aim to identify gaps in the probate conservatorship system and make recommendations to improve and augment services for conservatees. And lastly, we aim to identify best practices and make recommendations to streamline referrals between adult protective services and public guardian programs. This, as we transition to the next slide, this mission statement really plays off of the priorities that we have set for the year. Oftentimes we find that, I think in a statewide conversation, we all might not have the same, everybody has their own lived experience. And sometimes the frame of reference, somebody can be discussing conservatorship, and with care court a lot in the news and different needs, you know, people don't have a general sense of what we are talking about. And so we really want to prioritize creating that conversation across the board of people making visibility towards what exactly is probate conservatorship and uplifting decision-making tools that should be a first. And also, I really want to appreciate and uplift the work of our legal services work, because a key to empowering and living our most independent lives is for everyone, all individuals over 18 to engage in doing their advanced planning. And it's great that I'm not sure if my fellow committee member is on, but that our state has joined our other states across the nation who have made supported decision-making now part of our statutory scheme. And I see Aaron's there. And so to further make that resources and to help people understand how supported decision-making can help an adult use their support effective, how we can make sure that not only adults who have engaged in executing these documents are also not facing challenges by going to a bank or a school who might not be as aware of these newer documents. So we're looking forward to that work. And then we also, I'm just going to ask if my fellow work group member Hannah would like to unmute herself and speak a little bit more about the state council's rollout, or if not, I think I might see Aaron. And I apologize, the State Council on Developmental Disabilities. No. Okay. Well, I encourage you all to visit the State Council on Developmental Disabilities. They are putting together a resource page on the up-to-date information on where we can connect individuals with supported decision-making resources and support. They're also updating on the contracts that will be released and grant opportunities to further generate the network of professionals providing services for supported decision-making. Our second priority is on adult protective services and also complements the work of my fellow other co-work, the coffee's wearing off, the other work group member. And it's really to talk again about part of what the centering around the council, which is increased coordination. And so we're looking at adult protective services and public guardian and the coordination between those agencies and increasing how the process is done, and increasing what type of trainings both are receiving in order to, again, increase a smoother referral or coordination process. And so with that, I think I saw some hands.
Yeah, this is Vivian. I think we're going to go to the next slide and have some time for discussion about the work groups and our priorities.
You know, can I ask, I think it's Vivian, to you, I think it's funny how both work groups have identified estate planning as a priority, and estate planning really seems to be at the forefront almost organically across the state of legal services identifying that that's a gap. Do you want to talk a little bit about how your group came to identify that as a priority area as well?
Yeah, thanks, Berta. We had quite a few work group members bring up the issues that they had seen over the years of access to estate planning, in particular, and not just people getting access to maybe like advanced planning documents, but really the ways that advanced planning, actually having a will, potentially trusts, is a way to preserve wealth in low-income communities and marginalized communities. So we were actually able to have at one of our work group meetings, an attorney from Open Door Legal, which is in San Francisco, come and talk about their program where they are really trying to preserve wealth in predominantly Black and Brown communities with older adults by making sure that people are not dying with, their homes having what among lawyers they call a tangled title, where the title is not really clear, and trying to preserve the character communities and preserve wealth in families by making sure that homes are passing through the family and not just falling out. Because a lot of times what happens is that if the older adult who owns the home is low income, eventually when they pass, the family might not have the money to hire an attorney to figure out what they need to do to go through probate to preserve that home. And then the home just ends up being sold, and then you're losing an entire, valuable members of a community have to leave and move somewhere else. So we had heard that, and then we had also heard from other people that they didn't even really have access to, just these types of supportive decision-making documents, advanced planning documents. It's not always something that people are thinking about, just thinking about how are they going to age, what do they want as they age. So that's kind of how we identified it. And then we realized that there isn't necessarily a lot of legal services organizations that are prioritizing that kind of work. Obviously, with legal services, there are a ton of priorities. There's a lot of people in need. There's always going to be a ton of clients. So it's hard to get focused on, just a specific kind of niche area of law, because there's also just not a lot of attorneys who practice this type of law compared to other areas of law that legal services cover, like public benefits, for example.
Yeah, it's interesting on the ground in our practice. I know our elder justice teams, and with the housing crisis that we are seeing, we see a lot of now older adults who were caregivers to the previous generation who are living in a property, but the previous generation didn't do any estate planning. And so they can't access the equity that's in the home for their further, to fix up the house or to have some money to supplement their public benefits. So I think, what I value about this work is that we're looking holistically as to not only for autonomy and decision-making, to lessen the need for conservatorship, but really it's also work towards economic security of generations and future older adults in our state, or also adults with disabilities, talking about family planning and creating life estates so that older adults with disabilities can also live independently. Achilles, I know with your group, it was interesting to hear about the new models that you might be investigating. I was just wondering, are there any other models across the nation that you're looking to replicate, or any new technologies that APS might be looking at in order to make the referral service a more smoother process or a more integrated process with the other cross agencies?
That's something that, we need to look at more closely. I'm sure there are some models that work regionally very well and others that are more statewide. Like, for example, Texas, they have a very nice model in terms of a website where you make a report and then it goes to where it needs to go. Here in California, we are county administered, so looking at, and we are, the most populated state, almost 40 million. We receive about 240,000 reports of abuse a year statewide. So we would have to look at, what are the possibilities that would work based on region composition. So a lot of work to be done. I think there's a lot of possibilities. And we're at that stage. That's going to be part of our projects to look at what is working where and what is applicable here, so that people can go to one place, make a report. Those who need to be involved, they become involved timely. And I think that is going to be very helpful.
And it's important to remember that Achilles is doing all this work with the understanding that we're also waiting for potential federal regulations on APS. The comment period for that ended late last year, and I think we're all kind of anticipating sometime this year there will be some federal regulations, which this is a first. There are no federal regulations on APS at this point, widespread, and the APS programs, at least I've seen from my national work, vary so widely. No state is similar to another state at all. I think we have a question from, is it Blanca? I think I just saw her, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, yes, thank you, Vivian. And thank you, Achilles. I have the privilege of being on the subcommittee with Achilles and Carol Sewell and Jim. And we really, we appreciate that, even just raising this as a potential idea for the state to consider. We know that it would take a lot of money. It would take coordination and closing the gaps. But from previous meetings we've had, and even in our own subcommittee meetings, Achilles has also brought up this, but we also have it happening. As you know, we are always struggling, and the consumer, the person who wants to report, where do they start? Where do they go to even report elder or potential alleged elder and a neglect, or elder abuse and neglect? And even there's always this discussion on, well, they're in the hospital. Do we call the ombudsman or do we call APS? And so what we decided as a subcommittee was, let's come up with a very bold idea that Californians can really get behind, to elevate this as not only a statewide issue, but something that we can really help that person to not have to go through all these different entities to be able to report something, just because there's, they're not sure which number to contact. So to whatever extent we can have one call number that would then go out to all the, wherever wherever that jurisdiction is, but it could start there.
I know Carol has her, Lisa, sorry, has her hand up, but I just wanted to uplift the Start a Conversation series that the CDA is doing. I find that so compelling because what you were just saying, Blanca, really resonates with so many individuals. Don't know who they need until they're in a crisis. And when you're in a crisis, you can't process how to figure out how to navigate things, And so I really think that series, the Start Conversation, what we can do to make sure that people start hearing these agencies' names, like the long-term ombudsmans before, I think that when they're in those difficult situations, that will also further position them to move smoother, more smoothly. Lisa?
Bertha, you're stealing my thunder there.
Oh.
Because I wanted to echo that. The onus cannot be on the consumer to identify which of these multiple different state and county agencies are going to provide them with the information. And so I am very excited about the Start the Conversation. And I'd really like to see how the Start the Conversation could also be incorporated into the legal services and into our the conservatorship kind of things, because I think we would do middle income and as well as low-income families such a service. If we could educate them against this misnomer that advanced planning is only for the wealthy and it's only for somebody who owns a home. There are other assets that family members have, and advanced planning is more than just the things that you own. It's the opportunity for self-determination. And I think that it's so exciting that we're not giving people fishes, we're teaching them to fish, and we're teaching a structure on how to educate people and not to be so paternalistic that we know what's best for them. And by empowering people at the front end, that's going to save all of us work. You know, it's a work deterrent if people make decisions in advance of the crisis. So I am so excited. I don't know which program I'm more excited and wish I had more time to really be on all of the groups. So I just appreciate this opportunity to hear where all of the subcommittees are at, and however the commission can promote it and support it, we are all in. So thanks.
Thank you for that, Lisa. And then with that, in terms of, elevating and raising the visibility of tools that are available to embrace autonomy and self-determination, I believe, Hannah, if I can turn it over to you, if you want to further expound about the new rollout of the supported decision-making.
Hi, sure. Thanks, Bertha. My name is Hannah Dunham. I'm with the State Council on Developmental Disabilities. I'm the program manager for the Supported Decision-Making Technical Assistance Program. So our goal is to strengthen and expand the use of supported decision-making throughout the state of California. The primary populations that we're trying to target are folks with intellectual and developmental disabilities, aging, and mental health. They're individuals with mental health concerns. So it does target a pretty wide group of individuals. We were allocated $5 million for the program, and we are administering $3 million of that in grants and about $1.2 million in contracts. We actually have already released 3 of those contracts, and there will be one more, and the grant should be coming out hopefully the beginning of March. So we are looking at focus areas, realizing that people need support with making decisions in main areas of financial, IDD services, medical, education, and legal. So we're hoping that our grants are going to reach families and individuals as well as professionals in all of those areas, and hoping that we're able to, again, increase the use of supported decision-making throughout the state. We realize that there have been quite a few barriers to that implementation, and so we're hoping that some of these contracts and grants that we put out will help overcome those barriers so that individuals are able to successfully utilize supported decision-making as an alternative to conservatorship and as the least restrictive option in many of their life choices and areas.
Thank you, Hannah. And I know that your team spent so much time on the ground talking to families and help identifying like where the knowledge gaps were. And do you want to share anything out about that experience?
Sure. Yeah. So we did post a survey that was up for, I want to say it was a couple months. We got about 247 responses from individuals that included family advocates, self-advocates, and professionals, asking where they felt that there were barriers, where they felt needed more support. And it was pretty consistent across the board, that really just everywhere. We also heard from our community conversations. We held 5 meetings in October for those various focus areas that I mentioned, legal, financial, IDD services, education. And we had about 160 participants in those. And we heard that people haven't even heard of supported decision-making most of the times. And actually, a lot of the people that attended those meetings were thinking that it was going to be a training so they could get more information. So we definitely realized that that's a huge barrier in itself, is people not knowing about supported decision-making. And then families and professionals that were aware of it reported a lot of barriers in being able to use it. On the family side, it was that professionals weren't honoring it within their professions. And then from the professional side, we were hearing that they had concerns about, their legal obligations and things like that in being able to support families in using supported decision making. So that's how we based the direction of our contracts and our grants, is that feedback that we got from the surveys and the community conversations that we held.
That's great. Thank you, Hannah.
Mhm.
It'll be interesting, Vivian and Achilles and other members, if you've ran across people asking about supported decision making in your respective work groups. If you know, I'll know at BETZEDEC we started drafting a toolkit for supported decision making agreements and doing some education. Have you seen out in the community any other legal services, Vivian, that have been talking about doing that work to draft their own support decision-making toolkits or education around that?
I have not, but I think that there is a gap. We do need some actual resources for people. And I think, you know, what Hannah said about outside parties wondering about their ethical obligations really resonated with me. I think that that's something that's going to come up quite a bit, and we're going to need to find ways to answer those questions for licensed professionals so that they feel comfortable with more supported decision making tools at every level, just not just attorneys, but also potentially social workers, doctors, nurses, people, all the people that someone might be interacting with, making sure that they're all educated on what these documents even are, what they mean, and what they mean to their interactions with the clients as well.
Yeah. I want to open it up to other committee members that would like to speak on it, but I'll just say that if you haven't gone and read the Welfare and Institutions Code on support decision making, I think it's a very good read. I think because, as Vivian, to like your point, because I do believe the scheme also allows you to have a supporter, even if you don't have a supported decision making agreement present. And so making sure that those rights are being honored and respected, because I know even with traditional, I'll use the word traditional for lack of a better term, but advanced planning, if somebody goes to the bank, they'll be like, that's not our form. Or if you're trying to change something on a pension, that does not work with our company. So that'll be an interesting issue to support our community on.
Bertha,
Yeah,
can I add
definitely.
one more thing?
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Sorry. I just wanted to add that on that note, the contracts that we've already released, one of those is for a warm line, which is our hope that that's going to be staffed by individuals trained on supported decision making, and where they can help families and professionals get resources to successfully implement it. So that's one of the contracts that we have out, again, recognizing that the need is on both sides with the families and the professionals. So that's our goal for that one. And then the other two that are out right now is for an evaluation of the program, just to ensure that, you know, we're being as effective as we can. And then a resource library is coming. And then I'm completely drawing a blank on the other one. I apologize. But the warm line, really, it is a resource that we're hoping people can contact to both professionals and families to get that support. So just to add that in.
Great, Hannah. If I'm remembering, your third one is about marketing, and what you guys are doing a similar campaign to like start the conversation to really saturate the concept and help people understand what it is.
Yeah, thank you for that. And yes, so the goal for that is just making sure that the messaging that we're sending out is consistent and that people are getting accurate information and knowing where they can go for additional information. So we're hoping to have a very cohesive marketing branding program for that. Thank you so much, Berta.
Great.
Hey, Hannah, this is Aaron Carruthers, and you're doing great. I got you. I got your back. I put a link in the chat. Hopefully everybody can access it to the current invitation for bids that are open. And they include individual links that take you over to the contracting page for both the warm line evaluation and the marketing communications.
Perfect. Thank you, Aaron. And if possible, Berta, I can send you the flyers for those as well, if you're able to share it with everyone here in case anyone here is interested in bidding or interested in sharing it with someone that they know that might be able to bid.
I mean, yes, I think I'll defer to Ranjana on the best way to make sure that's distributed, but yes, I can kind of.
Perfect. Thank you.
I believe Lisa.
Yes, I have a question for Hannah. So I think broadly there has like confusion about supportive decision making in terms of you know, if I'm the daughter and I'm helping my mom, just, you know, doing her bills, I'm supporting her, but it's not a legal structure. And I know, I'm curious, will we be able to market into the community those places that are really the trusted resources, the churches, the villages, the senior centers, those places that older adults or family members go when they're unsure about what to do? Just last week, the commission got a phone call from a woman who you could just tell she just wanted to make a really good decision. She knew she needed to sell her home, and she was just overwhelmed with the process and didn't know who to call or what to do. And it just hurt my heart that she was just paralyzed because she just didn't have anybody that she trusted as a knowledgeable, unbiased resource. So I'm wondering how, and maybe supportive decision-making isn't that tool, but what is the thing that we can start marketing to older adults and family members to just acknowledge that, you know, in this day and age of technology and scammers and fast pace, and you make a mistake and you know, your assets are just wiped out. How can we normalize that everybody needs to have a thought process, thought partner? I'm excited about your program.
I think, Hannah, you just need to unmute.
Thank you. I'm also very excited about our program. That's one of the things that I've been trying to share when we're meeting, like sharing information, is that everybody needs help making decisions. You know, even myself, like if we get, you know, maybe bad news at the doctor, we want to talk it out with a friend, we want to talk it out with a loved one. So it is kind of a normal thing that a lot of us use already. We're hoping that with the Warm Line, in conjunction with the resource library, it will really give families some accurate, reliable resources that they can utilize. Again, we're hoping that that Warm Line person is going to be trained in SDM and have at least resources where they can get deeper advice on specific situations, like whether it's legal or medical. We're hoping that we'll get a bidder or an applicant that does have that kind of reach where they can make sure to provide that support for the actual implementation. What I would say is if you guys do have situations now, we at SCDD, we do have an email direct to the SDM TAP, and we have a phone number. We have gotten some requests already as far as people needing support with specific situations. And we are addressing those to the best that we can, recognizing that we're not actually able to provide training and things like that directly, but we do have some resources that we're able to put individuals in contact with to try and help them through these situations. So in the meantime, if you have families who need that support, you can always direct them to us, and we can do our best to try and get them some resources that they need. And I can put our email and our phone number in the chat.
If you could
Yes.
put that in the chat, because the commission will definitely use that as a resource, please.
Yeah, we can definitely do that. But once the Warm Line and the resource library are up and running, we're very confident that we'll have some good resources and direction for families and professionals. But great questions.
And I just want to, I know later on Uplift that we have the great presentation on Prepare, and it really is one of our work group members, Carla, who brought that to the forefront. And Carla, I'm just wondering, you know, that really resonates, I feel, with everything we've been saying this morning about access, making it easy and making it normal. Do you want to talk a little bit about, from your perspective, we'll hear about, kind of preview what we'll hear about later on from the Prepare presentation?
Yeah, I think what's important to know is that, you know, as a healthcare provider, as a physician seeing patients in many different settings, you know, what people are used to are getting these very legal forms about advanced care planning, specifically around healthcare, with terms that aren't understood, in formats that aren't understood. And so this is a way, it was actually done via research and with patient input to really have it in a readable format for all Californians. And it's actually being used in other parts of the country as well. And there's been a lot of work to actually get them culturally evaluated and linguistically evaluated in other languages. So it's what I use in my practice. I think the other thing is the opportunity to have it available in paper format for those of us that still love analog technologies. And then for those that like to be on the computer, it can be on computer as well with some simulated videos to go through some of the discussions. Because oftentimes, as a physician, you ask people about their preferences and they don't really understand. Some people do, but not everyone understands what choices they have in front of them around for their care. People assume it's just a live or die, feeding tube, no feeding tube, and there's much more nuances. And this helps us guide through what are the situations. It can't even be as important as things as, do you want people around you when you're dying? Do you want music? If someone played Christmas music, I've joked about this before, when I'm dying, hopefully I wouldn't be aware enough to realize that I don't want that. But so it's, I'm making light of something that's very serious, but it really gives an opportunity to understand it in a way that all Californians should be able to understand.
And I just want to echo that, I think part of the power of this council is the new collaborations that we create among ourselves. And thanks to Carla introducing Prepare to our work, the Prepare program came and presented to my team of attorneys that are on the ground. And so much of the issues that we face are, national caregiving, daughters here or moms here and daughters in another state. And the program that we're here on later really allows people to connect no matter where, where the caregiver is or where the care recipient, and ensure that protection. And I know I had team members that actually used it, and they just said, even as professionals in the field, gosh, I've never had these conversations with my parents. They're difficult to have. And going through this Prepare form really helps them kind of start having those conversations that are suggested just as the CDA programming. So again, I just wanted to echo, if you also work directly in the field, or if you're looking for a tool for your team, it's great that this will be recorded, because I think it will be valuable. It's extremely valuable. So I believe we still have time for further conversation. Is that right? So Achilles, from your team, I know you have a very dynamic priority list that's been set for this year. Among them, is there one that sticks out to you, or is there something that you're most excited about as you start off the year? I don't know if I can still say.
Yeah. Well, I think it's going to be, it's going to take a lot of assessing and thinking through. And like Vivian mentioned, what the federal regulations will say. So this year will bring a lot of shuffle, but also opportunities within the shuffle to see, what are ways that we can design something that is helpful. What I think coming from the adult protective services field and the partners that we need to collaborate with, adult protective services really depends on many other systems to help intervene and have someone be better off after intervention. And one of our main conduits is interagency collaboration coordination. And I think that exploring ways of working better with the legal aid system, for example, we're talking about state planning, supportive decision-making. Many of these need to be in place by the time we receive a report, is because there is some harm or suspected harm that person is facing. And having some tools already that are in existence is going to be very helpful, right? And especially in supporting the least restrictive way of helping someone and the most expeditious way. And sometimes these estate planning documents bring more expeditious interventions because they're based on what the person wanted when they were more able and capable, and how to make that transition. And sometimes the document may be there, but how to actually bring in that named supporter in the document to effectuate some actions that require some legal authority to do it. And I think that's where our legal partners come into play, right? And to help us and this larger system. And also there are many other possibilities where someone mentioned before, supportive decision-making is not only exclusively about having some sort of like I see it in a continuum based on to what extent you need some legal remedy or intervention and someone to act on your behalf. But I think in that direction, people have systems that they rely on, that they have trusted relatives, friends, significant others, you name it. And there are ways in which we can engage people and give them opportunities to take the next steps, which would involve other systems like legal aid, for example. So I'm thinking that through partnerships, through interagency coordination, having some sort of like way or blueprint so that jurisdictions across the state can more consistently know what to do and how to partner up and look at those possibilities to bring in these timely interventions. And the cross-reporting is more about the immediate response. Who needs to be involved? Not immediate as in, within the hour, but timely response that may take, some days for people to come in and really be part of this helping mechanism to really preserve a lot of the person's abilities and functions and well-being of their person and their properties, or whatever the nature of that would be. So I think that the subcommittee identified these two areas that if we pay attention to them, we are going to cover those gaps of timely response to these reports of abuse and timely, meaningful interventions that help preserve someone's lifestyle and preferences and choice. So I'm very hopeful for that, for sure. Carol, you have your...
Oh, thanks. Bertha, you were muted. Hi, I'm Carol Sewell, and I'm actually here representing Lisa Nuremberg, who is in Washington, D.C. right now at a conference. So I appreciate the chance to represent her and the work that CEJC is doing. I wanted to make a comment just about how connected all of this work is. And the tie, I think, is really getting legal services up to speed in being able to offer this supported decision-making guidance and helping people connect to the right kind of person to be that supporter, to be able to provide the estate planning and having the resources. And along the lines of the resource discussion, financing and funding, I recently learned that legal service providers who are recipients of federal funds cannot independently advocate on their own behalf before a legislative body. They need a specific invitation from the legislature to be able to do that. And so maybe that's something that the committee also needs to think about, is how do we create an opportunity maybe for the Judiciary Committee to hold an informational hearing and bring some legal service providers in so they can really hear about these new service needs and the funding concerns, because I know that's a big problem. So thank you.
Thanks for bringing that up, Carol. I think it is legal services agencies that receive funding from Legal Services Corporation have that specific restriction that's been around, I believe, since the 90s, welfare reforms. But the landscape of legal services in California is a little different than other states. Most states, there's a very few legal services organizations, generally like one or two, and generally most of the bulk, like 80%, 90% of their funding comes from Legal Services Corporation. But here in California, we actually have quite a few legal services organizations that do not receive any funding from Legal Services Corporation. They're fully independent and they don't have those restrictions. But I do agree, I think that this, getting the opinions of legal services organizations, people who are on the ground actually just working with clients, is really important. And I believe, someone correct me, but I think it was Representative Skinner sent out a letter asking for feedback on the budget from legal services organizations. And I think that was specifically looking for LSC funded orgs. But I think there's a great opportunity to have all orgs, LSC funded or not, providing input to the legislature about the issues that they are facing as organizations and the issues that they see that their clients are facing, because they see a very specific, section of our community, and they see the difficulties that they face, and also how those difficulties are interacting with social services agencies, the legal system, and they have a very unique perspective on that.
And then Vivian, I know that Justice and Aging is convening all statewide, the legal services providers that are the AAA agencies, legal providers for older adult services. So perhaps there's some opportunity to further uplift supported decision-making in that group and provide some technical trainings.
Yeah, I think that could be an opportunity to provide some information. I also wanted to follow up. I know, when we were previously talking about the supported decision making and, just its interactions with other licensed professionals and them interacting with these supported decision making documents, I think there might also be an opportunity for the council to assist in connecting with the licensing boards for different professions to provide opinions on how do you approach these things. Because I know, as an attorney, if there's an opinion from the state bar that says this is how you approach a supported decision making document or a supporter, and these are the things that you need to consider, I think that would be very helpful in providing that information to attorneys and other licensed professionals, so they have the confidence to know, okay, well, my licensing board says that this is okay, or this is the way that I should approach this, especially in light of, at least as an attorney, looking at, anyone, an older adult, you're concerned about potential exploitation and abuse. You want to make sure that there's, nothing nefarious going on with your client, and making sure you're protecting your client. So I think that might be really helpful for moving forward with supported decision-making documents.
And just circling back to something that Achilles has said in terms of collaboration, I know that we previously in some of our subgroups had been discussing like different MDT models. Is the legal services group still continuing to meet and kind of survey how common it is for MDT models to have legal services as part of their group?
Yeah, so that's kind of a floating topic that's still existing for us. I'd love to pull in Carol if Carol has any insight. I know that she provides some technical assistance for MDTs around the state.
Thanks, Vivian. Yeah, I have been meeting with MDTs for a couple of years now. And it was interesting because I feel like it does feel like there's a disconnect between the teams and civil legal services. And I know that some of my MDT coordinators have indicated such, that it comes to the issue of, prosecutors not being able to make that connection. One of my coordinators is in the DA's office in Santa Barbara, I believe, and has mentioned that issue. So really trying to find ways that will cross those barriers. Sometimes the county council will limit who can be part of an MDT. How do we, trying to figure out ways to get beyond those restrictions so that the people who are appropriate to that case can be in the room. That's the challenge, I think. And a lot of MDTs seem to have that connection, but I don't know that it's universal. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I know also at that one meeting we had, the issue of funding was brought up quite a bit. It's, people are not working for free generally, and they were having a hard time. Some civil legal aid organizations, could find funding intermittently to, for those hours to be in the room on the MDT, but they weren't always consistently able to find funding for that. We just got 2 pop-ups. Let's go. Oh, 3. So let's go Lisa, and then Kimberly, and then Blanca.
Mine was just very quick to say the funding for those is absolutely crucial. Just learned of the MDT in the Sonoma area, that they lost the grant for that in January 1. And so that is an incredibly successful MDT from my perspective, but without paid staff to keep the invitations up, to keep track of the changes that are happening in the various departments, I don't see that that's going to be a sustainable effort by volunteers. So it's kind of sad.
So my comment was really going back to something that Vivian had said, talking about the professional licensing boards and working on certain statements with attorneys. And I think a lot of times they won't, the licensing boards are not going to come out with maybe a statement, but really working with them to find subject matter experts that can assist with these and give input on them and working together in it, and kind of running those through. I think another resource that our licensing boards can be is getting information out. We are the one entity that every licensee has to come to get licensed and then to renew their license. And so information on all of these subjects, I think, would be good for some of our licensing entities to put into their newsletters, to put on their websites, and would love to partner with all of you. They also have, for some of our license types, they have subscription lists where if we had something about this issue that we wanted to make sure individuals knew, we could put that in to a subscription and to a statement that goes out to individuals as well, all of those licensees, trying to inform them and give them resources of where they can go to get educated. So just wanted to put that out there. When I heard Vivian, you talking about that, it kind of perked my interest as well.
Thank you, Kimberly. We're going to take you up on that.
Yeah, just two items. On the funding, I think it may be worthwhile to approach some foundations. Archstone, there's there are quite a few that focus on older adults, people with disabilities. That I think that's one of the things the Master Plan on Aging has really demonstrated, is that we're going to need to look at other ways to fund some of these initiatives, and even if it's beginning with a pilot. The other thing I wanted to flag, and that is with regard to the MDTs, when we had the convening on older adults and older adults with disabilities last year with regarding the MDTs. One thing that did come up also is not just around, as we're talking about closing the gaps rather, and barriers, but we're also how do you track data across the various entities, because we're all working within on the same case or with the same individual, and really tracking to help when you're talking about funding. How can you demonstrate effectiveness and success, or reduce returning back to opening up a case in abuse or neglect. So those kinds of those two very distinct but important areas, which is you need data to be able to demonstrate these are working, or why we need more funding. And I think that's tied to also some of the ways that we can create a business case to the nonprofits and foundations.
So true, Blanca. And so it's so interesting that there's a lot of private foundations at the federal, seem to be supporting things at the federal level, right? The National Family Caregiving, that might not be the correct title, but was funded by a private foundation. A lot of those are by invitation. So it'll be interesting to see what we can do to further help our partners, our colleagues be invited to those, or hold those, uplift the conversations we're having to their attention. Your comments also reminded me of, I recently attended Innovations in Technology conference from LSC, and there the discussion around access to justice from a legal services perspective was leveraging technology to help address, to build justice bridges. And I think that's interesting in terms of what you're talking about, data tracking, to be able to get a little, investment or interest from a technology sphere, or try to look at the problem from that angle. A lot of the courts have, Los Angeles Superior Court recently teamed up with the Stanford Law School and their design lab to kind of address why litigants aren't accessing like self-help services. I think the Pew Charitable Trust did some work with one of the courts back east to also like assess, so that multidisciplinary, but I think widening it to kind of address these service gaps might be another interesting angle. Well, did anyone else have any further comments or matters that they wanted to raise during this part? No. Well, with that, I will turn it over to Ranjana.
Thank you, Bertha. I just want to thank our esteemed chairs, Vivian, Achilles, Bertha. Your leadership and dedication to EDJCC is truly commendable, and thank you for guiding this discussion and driving our initiatives forward. And with that, I would like to hand it over to Carol for a 10-minute break. If everyone can come back after 10 minutes, then we can go ahead and move on with our agenda.
So we have 11:16. We'll be back at 11:26. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope everyone had a good break. Now I'm excited to introduce our next presentation, Dr. Rebecca Sidori, geriatrician from UCSF, who unfortunately couldn't be with us in person today, but has graciously provided a pre-recorded video presentation on the incredibly important resource tool that she and her team have developed called Prepare for Your Care. Rosie, without further delay, let's turn our attention to Dr. Sidori's pre-recorded video presentation.
Letting me record this session. Rebecca Sidori. I'm a geriatrician and a palliative medicine physician at UCSF here, and a good colleague of one of your members, Dr. Carla Parasinato, who I'm a big fan of. Hi, Carla. I'm sorry I'm away at a medical conference, but thank you for letting me record this session, and I will have sent some slides as well, if that's helpful to follow along. So let me share my screen. So today I will be talking about the Prepare for Your Care program, which is an online secure advanced care planning program in English and Spanish. Some questions were sent to me, and I hope that I answer all of them as we go through this talk. And at the end, if there are more questions, you can definitely feel free to email me. I just wanted to tell you a little bit about our team. So the Prepare program is actually a program within the University of California. It includes my team, including myself and Jana Powell, who I think is also on this call today, Clarissa and Burkell. We are very close colleagues with Sarah Hooper and Denise Watt, who are at UC Law, and you'll be hearing a little bit more about their program. It's a sister program to Prepare called Clarity. We work with a web developer, People Designs, and for many, many decades at this point, we work very closely with community advisory boards to create and test all of our materials, including patients, caregivers, and experts in aging, ethics, health literacy, communication, and behavior change. I think I wanted to start by just talking about how the advanced care planning field is evolving. So many of you may know about the 1991 Patient Self-Determination Act, which really sort of focused on helping people be able to write down the kind of medical care they would want or not want. And that, act really was focused on forms, like advanced directives and then later on physicians' orders for life-sustaining treatment. And this act, and I would say advanced care planning for really the decades after that, was really focused on treatment decisions about medical procedures like CPR or mechanical ventilation, a breathing machine, in advance of serious illness. And again, often focused on these forms, advanced directives and pulse forms. And I just wanted to let you know, in the last decade or so, there's been sort of this movement to sort of rethink advanced care planning. We wrote this paper back in 2010 now about redefining the planning in advanced care planning and preparing people for end-of-life decision-making in the annals of internal medicine. And this called for not only thinking about life-sustaining treatments at the very end of life, but thinking about this new and improved model of preparing people for communication and medical decision-making over the life course. And I will say it might be interesting to know that there really wasn't a formal definition of advanced care planning until 2017, when we convened a very large international Delphi panel that included lawyers about what advanced care planning should be. So this is the updated definition, which has since been even updated more, which is in the red text. But advanced care planning is a process, not a one-time event, not one form, that supports adults at any age or stage of health in understanding and sharing their personal values, life goals, and preferences regarding current or future medical care, and prepares them and their proxies, medical decision makers, for communication and medical decision making. And just in this last year, in 2023, we actually published a paper in the Journal of American Geriatric Society talking about this care planning umbrella, which is the evolution of advanced care planning, and really thinking about it advanced care planning really over the life course, that we can do care planning for healthy adults and people with chronic illness. We can do it for people with serious illness, and we can do it for people with end of life, but those decisions and settings may be different for different people over the life course. But again, when we think about advanced care planning, the definition really has updated to the focus. It really is on preparation and communication for medical decision making. And this new care planning across the life course. So sometimes we'll hear, particularly from lawyers and clinicians, well, how does this help at the bedside if we're thinking about this as a process and forms are important, but it's not just about the forms. What do we do? Well, we know that studies show that communication is key, even if there is an advance directive. So studies have shown that surrogates and clinicians really do not understand patients' wishes really no better than chance if there hasn't been a discussion. And I often say, as in my palliative care role, having ICU family meetings with people at the bedside, families and loved ones, people can say, oh, this person didn't have an advance directive, but we've been talking about this for the last 10 years, and I really know what's important to this person. And someone could have an advance directive, and the people who are there might be shocked that their name was listed as the surrogate decision maker, and may not have any context or know why that person made those decisions. So if we have this ongoing communication and we have forms, when we think about situations where somebody is without a potential decision maker or proxy, if we have advance directives that include things like values and goals and preferences, like we do in our Prepare for Your Care program, which I'll tell you about, if we have things like oral advance directives that are written down and documented in our clinical medical records, or there are ongoing advanced care planning notes that have been documented in the medical record, this really helps us as clinicians to know what is it that that person values and is important to them, but also the really important contextual piece about why, which is really important when patients, their families, and clinicians are struggling at the bedside to know what is the most appropriate thing to do for someone. If they do have a potential decision maker, and we have this advance directive or pulse, we have oral advance directives, and we have these notes, again, it provides all of this context to help us know who and what they value, as well as why. One of the questions that came up, was what is the importance of having a healthcare proxy? What are the things that are important? What could go wrong? What are the benefits? Well, I think it's important to know that up to 75% of some or all end-of-life decisions for all of us will need to be made by a surrogate or a proxy. So this makes it very important that people think about who this person would be and designate them, particularly documenting them in a medical form. We also know from studies that anywhere, this is in California, that anywhere between 5 and 20% of patients in the ICUs are caring for incapacitated patients without a proxy. So this means that people might be, on machines, mechanical ventilation and other things for months at a time, and people do not know what is important to that person. And, clinicians are really sort of left wondering what to do. And I think that's one of the things that's important to think about, that lack of a proxy really leads to patients' wishes that are unknown and may not be honored. Decisions maybe being made by people who do not know that person very well. So, not in California, but in other states, there's default surrogate decision makers. And often in California, we'll be looking for the next of kin. And I can tell you as a clinician, sometimes those people haven't spoken to the patient in years. And yet those are the people that are now sort of legally making medical decisions for someone. And not to mention the moral distress for clinical care teams, as well as sort of setting up these ethical conundrums when family members are not agreeing about who should make these decisions and it's unclear what to do for someone. So just to say that documenting a healthcare proxy and preparing them is very important. So this leads me to transitioning a little bit to tell you about our Prepare for Your Care program, which is an online, secure, advanced care planning program for people and their caregivers and proxies that include easy-to-read advanced directives. It is the only patient and caregiver-facing program that's been designated as an evidence-based program by the National Council on Aging. And as you can see here, it includes these two programs. So Prepare for Your Care, which is to help people have a voice in their medical care, and Prepare for Their Care, which is to help other people with their medical planning and medical decisions. And we have a whole host of easy to read advanced directives, which I'll tell you about in multiple languages. So I'll just say that this program is really based on decades of my research. It's been the focus of my research since I started way back in the early 2000s. It has been co-developed with patients, caregivers, and communities. And I'll just say, I won't bore you with this schematic, but just to say that there are many, many steps in getting to a finalized product. We don't just create something and put it out there. We do sort of our due diligence with very rigorous, community engaged research to make sure that all of the versions of all of our forms, all of our materials on our website, all of our videos are culturally adapted and evidence-based. The other thing that's really important to us is that we really take health literacy seriously, and this is a major consideration in all the work that we do. You may know that the average reading level in the US is only at the 8th grade level, and for Medicaid and the elderly, it's only at the 5th grade level. And we know, unfortunately, that advanced directives and many other things like consent forms that we have for patients are written well beyond a 12th grade reading level. There are also language considerations. So we know that 61 million people, or about 20% of people in the US, speak a language other than English at home. And this includes 40 million Spanish speakers and over 3 million Chinese speaking individuals. There are cognitive considerations. So we've engaged in what's cognitive aware development, really thinking about memory aids, limited decisions per page, et cetera, to help people and decrease that cognitive burden as they're going through our forms or our online program. There are also cultural considerations. So many people in California and in our country have really hold non-Western views on autonomy and decision-making. And what we mean by that is in our studies, we find that about 20% of people report that they don't want to make their own medical decisions, even if they can make them themselves right now. And 20% report that they do not have a trusted decision maker. So even though we're looking, and it's really important to designate that proxy, we also have to help people because many of them may be unbefriended. We also know that there is real and unfortunate experiential racism, and our health system has not been proven to be very trustworthy. And so we have to think about all of these things when we've been creating our materials to be able to reach a broad audience and decrease health disparities. And really, I would say what really we focus on and prepare in our, whether it's an advanced directive form or the website, is really what matters most to people. And what matters most to people is not the treatment, but the outcome of treatment. And that's why I put this cart before the horse. It's not intubation or CPR, which I'm calling the cart, but really how their life will be after that treatment and their quality of life when I'm calling the horse. I would say in medicine, we're trained to ask people, do you want CPR? Do you want medical ventilation? And what we really should be asking people is, what does quality of life mean to you? And how do you want to live your life? And based on that, I'm going to match those treatments that make the most sense for you. So we have found in our research that basically there's a missing puzzle piece, and that missing puzzle piece to provide to people out in the world is to prepare them with skills to identify what is most important and how they want to live, how to talk with family and friends if they're available, how to talk with medical providers, how to make informed decisions, and how do you get the care that is right for them. And again, this is important whether somebody has a surrogate decision maker or whether they don't. And again, just to remind you that we had published this paper about redefining the planning and advanced care planning, and Prepare for Your Care is really based on these new and improved advanced care planning models that, yes, may touch on life-sustaining treatments, but really is about preparation for communication and medical decision-making over the life course. So I think, again, when we think about these things, it's who and what do they value and why? And these are the things that are really important at the bedside. And Prepare uses video stories and easy to read advanced directives to help people make medical decisions based on their values. The program walks people through sort of step by step, these 5 steps. 1, choose a medical decision maker. 2, decide what matters most in life. 3, choose flexibility for your decision maker. 4, tell others about your wishes. And 5, ask doctors and medical care team the right questions. The cornerstone of the website are these videos that show people how to do something. So we realized and heard from people it wasn't enough just to say, hey, you really should choose a proxy, or you really should think about what's important to you. And we heard that people didn't know how to do those things. And so we provided videos that really model that behavior and provide the actual words people can say. For example, how to ask someone to be your decision maker and how to ask doctors the right questions. All of the material in the websites and all of our videos are written at a 5th grade reading level. If people want it, there's narration that will actually read the content of the webpage to them, as well as closed captioning for all of our videos. And I think there are other sort of how-to videos that are really important for people who may not have a proxy. So we tell people there's a whole video that it's okay if you're not ready to name a medical decision maker or proxy, and then try to normalize that, because we realize that some people are so distressed about that, it's hard for them to start to engage in advanced care planning. And we also have videos that describe things, like one of our characters, Ken, says, I'm a loner. And Helen says, well, I don't, my husband died, but maybe what I can do is choose my neighbor since we're close and she knows what's important to me. So really trying to help people think outside of the box when they're choosing their decision maker. The program also includes easy to read advanced directives. These have been extensively legally vetted by our partners, Sarah Hooper and her team at UC Law. And have been tested through the National Center for Medical Legal Partnerships. Again, this is written at a 5th grade reading level. And we've done research on these forms. So again, we didn't just create them and put them out in the world and say that they were great. We did multiple rounds and continue to do so with our community partners to make sure that the wording is correct, it's culturally appropriate. And we've actually conducted randomized trials, both in English and Spanish, where we found that we were able to double the completion rates from baseline. And at the end of the trial, basically 99.9% of people overwhelmingly preferred the easy to read form. And this was really regardless of literacy or language. So even people with high literacy prefer these prepare advanced directives. In California, we have this form is available in 11 languages. We also over time have created these materials in English and Spanish for all US states. And we have 13 states that are in Chinese, and that's growing. We also have a DCHS all plan letter that we've had since 2005 for this form. So Prepare integrates easy to read advanced directives for all US states in English and Spanish, and again, with a growing number in Chinese. The forms also have space to write what people's values are and why. So these forms might look a little different than what you might have seen before with checkboxes for CPR or mechanical ventilation. We really focus on things like quality of life and how this may differ for each person. The thing that might, things that might be hard on somebody's quality of life if they were at the end of life, and really space to write what else is important to them and their values, such as what would be important to you if you had dementia, what would be important to you if you no longer could drive, how do you feel about transitioning to a nursing home or assisted living. And as people are going through the website, this will basically pre-populate answers onto a legal advanced directive form. People can download the form and print it and write on it. They could download the form, and actually it's an editable PDF so people can fill it out on their computer. Or as they're going through Prepare and answering questions sort of step by step, the program will actually take their answers and pre-populate that onto an advanced directive so they don't have to do an extra step. And for people who just want to go and get information about how to fill out the advanced directive without going through the 5 steps, there's actually an advanced directive step that will walk people through that with additional information and videos to help them answer the questions. We have found that Prepare makes advanced care planning easier on patients and clinicians. And again, this has been proven outcomes in additional randomized control trials. I'll just tell you very briefly about 2 randomized controlled trials that were published in the JAMA Internal Medicine that included 1,400 English and Spanish speaking older adults. It's important to know in this trial, we did absolutely no clinician education or interventions. We did not change the electronic health record or change the health system or any of the workflows, because we really wanted to know how much bang for a buck could we get if all we did was provide easy to read, easy to understand advanced care planning information to patients. So in this intervention, one arm got our easy to read advanced directive, which we found was still quite effective, and the other arm got the easy to read advanced directive plus Prepare. I'll just say, just to draw your attention to the patient characteristics, almost 50% were Spanish speaking and about 40% had limited health literacy, and some were actually completely illiterate. We found in our randomized control trial, again with over 1,400 English and Spanish speaking older adults, that this patient-facing tool actually primes patients and decreases health disparities. So we found that after reviewing the Prepare online program in English or Spanish, 98% of people were able to engage in some form of advanced care planning, whether that was designating a surrogate or filling out an advanced directive or talking to their family and friends about their values and wishes. When we then looked in the electronic health record, we found that Prepare increased advanced care planning documentation from 8.5% to 43%. And if you recall, this is a patient-facing only trial, meaning the patient had to be empowered to complete the advanced directive, bring it into their primary care appointment to get it scanned in by the clinical care team. I think what was most exciting to us is that we then actually did directly observed visits where we audio recorded almost 400 of these primary care visits after people reviewed Prepare and the easy to read advanced directive. And we found that people who reviewed the website, there was a 50% greater patient empowerment and clinician responsiveness. This means that patients were able to speak up about advanced care planning and their wishes, and clinicians were able to engage with them in that. And I think most importantly, we found there was a 50% increase in real-time goal concordant care from 33% to almost 60%. And that means that patients are reporting that they're getting the care that aligns with their goals and wishes. In all of our trials, we found that the Prepare Advanced Directive and the online website decreased health disparities. And we think this is true because Prepare was co-created with communities really to address these outdated models of advanced care planning, really moving away from these check boxes and moving to preparation. We address limited health literacy and digital literacy. We address culture and language, diversity, as well as visual, hearing, and cognitive impairment. And we've proven success in health systems. So we launched a program as part of a PCORI, this Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute trial in the UC system at UCLA, UCI, and UCSF. We also did a quality improvement project at UCSF as well, where we sent out, in using the electronic health record, automated messages about the Prepare program and easy to read advanced directives to our primary care patients who are over the age of 65. And we've had just amazing success. So in 2019, when we started this, the advanced care planning documentation in our medical record was about 18%. And as of 2023, basically for all patients, it's gone up to almost 70%. And for those who are seriously ill, 91%. And I wanted to tell you as well about a new caregiver program. So I think I told you there's stuff for people to do their own care planning. That's Prepare for Your Care. And this last year, we launched Prepare for Their Care with a foundation grant from the Greenwall Foundation. And the Prepare for Their Care program has two important topics. One, how do you help other people with their medical planning when people can still speak for themselves? And two, how to help medical decisions, or how to make medical decisions for other people when people cannot or do not want to speak for themselves. I'll tell you, for years, we've been hearing from patients and family members, boy, I really want to talk to my loved one about advanced care planning, and I really want to help them with their advanced care planning, but I don't know what to say and I don't know how to bring it up. And that's what this program does. And we've also heard from people that are, oh my goodness, now I'm in a situation where my name was listed on that advanced directive, or I'm in the ICU and I have to make decisions for my loved one. I have no idea what to do. I have no framework for how to make those decisions. And again, that's what we address in the other part of this program. We have done some pilot studies which show high satisfaction. The other thing that was really interesting about the pilot that we're in the middle of publishing now is that the caregivers or potential proxies who completed this program, they also statistically significantly started doing their own advanced care planning. So I think that there's some reciprocal things by actually helping families and caregivers plan themselves through this Prepare for Their Care program, as well as helping people with their own medical planning. Just to tell you, we have a lot of Prepare tools for clinicians as well. We know that Prepare primes patients for their visits, and so we have these Prepare pamphlets, which are really the outline of the website, as well as our easy to read advanced directives. And a lot of clinicians and clinics are sending these to patients or giving them out before their visits. We also have quick start guides for patients. We also have this toolkit for group movie events, which can be used in a group medical visit, can also be used in churches, libraries, and senior centers, as we have to good effect. Studies looking at this group visit, sort of group event model, has shown increased advanced care planning documentation from 44% to 71%, and surrogate designation from 75 to 93%. We also have what we call simple scripts for really easy step-by-step process for how clinicians really, at any stage from training all the way through to professional and multi and interdisciplinary professionals can use this to start advanced care planning conversations. There were some additional questions that I just wanted to make sure that I addressed before I end. And one was, does Prepare work for everyone, particularly grandparents of minor children? Well, I will say that Prepare and advanced care planning in general is only for adults. And I checked with our legal team at UC Law, and I think for grandparents of minors, they would need to do additional disability and life planning. And maybe that's something that Sarah Hooper can address when she speaks to you about the Clarity program. There were questions also about, wishes for assisted living in nursing homes, but really planning for financial affairs and living trusts. And Prepare, really just to say, focuses on healthcare decisions and healthcare proxies. So people can document things that are important to them, such as their wishes about transitioning to assisted living or a nursing home and other things that are important to them. But when we really get into the financial planning, that's where the program Clarity and planforclarity.org can help. Sarah Hooper, again at UC Law, is helping to put, or is leading this project for Clarity. And she'll be, I think, speaking to you later about this and how it can help with the financial affairs. Just to tell you about partnering with Prepare, for those that are interested, there are many ways that groups can partner with us. So people can share the prepareforyourcare.org URL or print the Prepare materials directly from the Prepare website to distribute for personal use. This is free. This does not require a license. We ask people to download things directly from our website. You can imagine that easy to read advanced directives are updated with changes in laws. We're updating our materials all the time. And so to make sure that things are legally valid, that we have people just take them from the website or use our URL to make sure everything is up to date. But individuals can co-brand, or organizations can co-brand and integrate a subset of our Prepare materials into their advanced care planning activities, like our advanced directives. And then there are those that want to white label, customize, and integrate really all of our Prepare materials into their activities. That could include the videos, as well as the advanced directives and our other written materials. And we also have licenses for research. So we're involved, as you know, in many different randomized trials that include, the Prepare program in those trials, as well as quality improvement programs. So there was a question about the reach of Prepare. We've definitely had over 1 million visitors and downloads in over 100 countries with our materials. As a reminder, the website is in English and Spanish in terms of getting that reach, and our advanced directives are in 11 languages in California. As a reminder as well, the Prepare program is available for free, and we know that several organizations download our materials to print and give out. So we know that the number of people who are actually touched by our program is much, much larger than we are able to quantify. We are also working with several health plans and health systems and community-based organizations, as well as funding and research partners. This is just a few examples off to the side here. If there are more questions about Prepare or advanced care planning, we have several FAQ resources that can be found both on the prepareforyourcare.org website and on the preparefortheircare.org website. And with that, I will say thank you so much for this opportunity. Please, if there are any additional questions, feel free to reach out to me at rebecca.sidori@ucsf.edu. Thank you so much.
We'd like to thank Dr. Sidori and her team for providing such a great presentation, and the Prepare tool is extremely well thought out for both family and caregivers, and has a very person-centered approach to it as well. If anyone would like further information regarding Prepare, the resource tool, I've included the link in the chat, and feel free to forward any questions to the Engage box, engage@aging.ca.gov. Your emails will be forwarded to Dr. Sidori's team, who will also be more than happy to assist you. I also believe we have Dr. Carla Parasinati on the call with us, as well as Jana Powell, if anyone from our council membership, our council members have questions for them.
Carla, I was just wondering, as a practitioner, how have you been able to overcome the messaging with a tool that's used across different cultures and different, practices towards an end of life planning to really get people to engage with the tool?
Yeah, so I think that, I think Rebecca's tool helps address a lot of it. Yet at the same time, I think that there are some cultures that that just don't feel comfortable. And so honestly, a lot of the time it's about trust between the clinician or the clinical team and the patient and their family. And there are times that it just means that I'm bringing up repeatedly, especially when I'm seeing things more urgent. And I think the reality is that as much as we, with my optimist hat, as much as I wish that everyone had this, the reality is that it doesn't always happen. And there are times where we get to the end of life in the days and aftermath where suddenly people are like, oh, this is why you wanted me to do this. But what's helpful sometimes is that then when the clinical teams are in communication, is even when documentations are not there, then there's more communication when things become more critical about, okay, yes, the farm was never done, but I know that this is what we know about this person to help to guide decisions. It's just not perfect. I mean, I think talking about death, disability, and aging, something very known to this group, is still not always welcomed. And so it's just ongoing education, which is why we're so excited to talk about this to this whole group here, since we all play a different role in this and know that education, and knowledge is a big step of it.
Thank you. I think we have a question from Lisa Coleman.
I'm super excited about this. This is something that I have been really passionate about from the time when I was an ombudsman, working with residents in skilled nursing facilities. And if there was a way to bring the narrative back away from it being an older adult issue. This is a human issue. Any one of us could be struck by a car and put into a coma tomorrow, and our wishes are now subject to whoever gets to the hospital first, right? Whether that's my mother or my husband or my son, or, and that makes me anxious because what I want may be different than what they want. I know it is. In my family, they joke about, don't have Lisa on your advanced healthcare directives because she'll pull the plug on a hangnail. And that's just my bias, right? But one of the things that I always talk about, throwing stuff against the wall to see what could happen. Advanced healthcare planning to me is not a one and done. And I'm wondering if there's a way that we can incorporate that. This is something that maybe should be updated every few years. I have suggested multiple times that it be at DMV. You fill out the donor card. Well, fill out your advanced healthcare directive card. And every time you have to renew your license, you have to renew your advanced healthcare directive, because the decisions you may feel about end of life at 20 is probably very different than 40 or 70 or 80. Yeah. So I like to just throw that at the wall. Anybody that wants to take me up on that, I think that would be a really interesting activity. So hopefully, Carla, what your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I would say I like that. And I think, right or wrong, sometimes when I do have these discussions, I do personalize and say, hey, I'm 46 and I have mine done as well. And talk about, how I went through the decision making of doing. And I think you're absolutely right that it's not a one and done, because what I may want now is different if I have serious illness later, et cetera. I will caution with the idea of repeating it. Yes, it needs to be revisited. But if we put any time limit or how that's done in true implementation is a challenge, because what I see on the acute care side is that even though we have documented wishes, when it's constantly revisited when someone's not their best self and in a crisis, then that's when we get these back and forths and confusion and what the decision making. And because not all clinicians and not all people are actually understand decision-making ability, then we're sometimes asking these questions of people in a state where they're not able to make those critical decisions. So it's very slippery. So yes, and with caution, I would say to your comment.
Absolutely, because that's why I'm thinking DMV, get it away from the hospital setting, get it away from the emotions of this is an imminent kind of thing, and it's more of a pragmatic. But I agree, it's not something that people in human nature, you're going to want to do it often. But
well, and it's interesting with the DMV thing, because again, in my times working in the hospital, I don't think no one ever checked the donor status on the ID cards. It's a whole nother process. And so it's always a question of implementation. What is the right place to have these conversations? And with the people that know them best. Sometimes they're often relegated to the hospital, which is not the people that know them best. And I certainly have frustrations when these discussions have been happening in the inpatient. I'm like, wait, but I've had these intense conversations in people's homes, and it's very different when they're in their own environment and in a stable state. So.
Do you encounter what are your recommendations on thinking overcoming? I think sometimes when we see caregivers that are so passionate about caring for someone who they believe has vulnerabilities, they make assumptions about decision making. And what do you think are some of the tools that we should be elevating towards, I think, telling that story or helping change that perception of, as you just mentioned, the decision making being a spectrum?
Yeah, so I think it goes along with a lot of this work of this group is the ideas of self-determination and assuming that the person has the ability to speak for themselves until proven otherwise. And there's a couple things in our tool belt. You know, there are times when I kind of laugh but don't when I'll talk to a patient, the family's in the background being like, no, don't do that, or they don't know what they're talking about. I'm like, hey, I'm not an idiot. I know how to have these conversations. I will talk to you in a bit, but I need to hear from this person first. And so I think that's part of it, is understanding that this is a shared conversation sometimes, and sometimes it is between, the individual patient and the clinician. But those biases are tricky. And it's hard when people overspeak for others, and that is hugely problematic. At the risk of sounding redundant, we're ageist and we constantly have these assumptions of people who are older and or older with disabilities in terms of what they can and can't do, and remembering to go back to some basic things and assuming first that someone can do this and then readdressing from there. That's a long answer that probably didn't answer anything.
No, it did. Sometimes we're on autopilot, and we need to, as practitioners in the field, remind people that we can't be on autopilot and own our own biases or our own paternalistic feelings.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And I think the other really nice thing about the document like Prepare is that some of the decisions are much more medically complex, but part of it is also understanding is like, who is this person and what's important? And so, for example, if I have someone that says like, well, I really want to die at home, or I can't talk about the actual dying part, but I know where I want to be in the last phases of my life. Well, that's really important knowledge. And that's there's different levels of decision-making abilities for different decisions. And so maybe it's even saying that what's important to you in terms of burial, like that's important knowledge, even if it doesn't address whether I want to, intubation or not, like those other things around what's important to you are so, so critical. So.
Thank you. And I think Marty had a question. Go ahead, Marty.
Hey, thank you. And thank you for this presentation. It was very helpful. My name is Marty Emoto. I'm a dad of an adult, 31-year-old, adopted person with Down syndrome and on the spectrum, behavioral health needs, and also a family member. Our older sister had developmental disabilities and physical disabilities. I really appreciate this. In many ways, I wish I had some of this information, even though I know a lot because I worked with my sister when she was constantly in ERs in the hospital, and she died in her 50s. But the reason why is because Alex's mother, my son, she was in her late 60s, and as her health declined, she was in the hospital. And eventually she wasn't sure about making her own healthcare decisions and then asked me to step in to make those decisions. So it wasn't technically legal, but the hospital wanted me there because she could no longer speak. And so there was sort of this agreement, but I felt a little pressured because I had to think of her son, Alex, in the equation. He's 31 years, he was 25 then. And then I had to think of her, what she wanted. And then I felt pressure from the hospital, ER, urgent care staff, great people, but they wanted me, they thought I would step in and say, yes, put her on comfort care, hospice, because clearly she was on the decline. And that's not what she wanted to do, but she could no longer speak. So the training I had was all basically lived experiences through my sister dealing with that. And I finally had to decide, I'm gonna, as long as I can frame a question to her on what she wanted to do, what the hospital was putting to me, then I would go with that. So I framed the question in a way that was simply yes or no, that she could move her head. And I think that isn't training I had, it's just the lived experiences. You got to find a way to communicate. And as long as I could communicate with her, I would be able to do that. But weighing that, I also had to weigh what her son felt, which was difficult. But the pressure I felt from the hospital to put her on comfort care, regardless of what she wanted, was very intense. It's almost like I wasn't doing the right thing. And I don't think, obviously you can only help people so much, but I do think the information you provided at least provides some foundation that, I wish I could have gone back to see, because I just felt really lost. On some days, I just felt overwhelmed on what was the right thing for me to do. And it didn't last just a few days. It lasted months until she actually died. So I just want to thank you. It wasn't really a question, but I guess, where does this go from here? I guess, I think the more information that can be put out there, the more families or people can be trained. So I kind of wish she would have been trained earlier in her life to actually have this put together, because the way she asked me I wasn't really prepared, and then it was contingent on another issue of, would I take her son? Would I care for her son? Because that was tied to what decision she would make, whether, she would accept comfort care or not. And eventually I did agree to take her son, who I love, and he's my son now. But there's a lot of stuff tied into this. So I don't know if that's a question for you, Carla.
Well, Marty, I think what you bring up to me in hearing all this is that these are hard decisions. Not only are these life or death, they're philosophical decisions, they're ethical decisions. As someone who has taken care of people with critical illness, there's a lot of moral distress for clinicians in the hospital when you see someone who's clearly dying and we don't let them die. How do you define life? I mean, this isn't meant to be so like, yeah, sure, let Lisa pull the plug on, it's not that simple, but because it's very wrought with discussion, but I think this allows to create a framework and have more education. I will say, and I'll say that this is my bias, is that I think that there are some medical decisions that we are putting too much responsibility on patients and families, that should not be their decision. Whether someone gets intubated or not really should be partially a medical decision. Same thing with feeding tubes, but it's nuanced. Again, we live in a country where we believe a lot in individual rights, and it's important to respect that. And I, as a physician, should not be forced to do things that I don't want to get into this complication, but it's very complicated. I'm just going to say that. And how do you determine what's medically appropriate or not? It's very tricky. So understanding someone's values, which is why when I have these discussions driven by, and I see I need to be quiet, driven by people's wishes, can be really help to inform discussions. Sorry.
I appreciate that response, because it is, like you said, nuanced, and it was confusing. But the other thing that I didn't necessarily see in the preparation was that I finally realized that her response about what to do was tied to my response to whether I'd take care of her son. And I didn't understand that piece until literally about a few weeks before she died. And I finally realized I didn't say I had to say yes, but I knew that I did say yes. And that allowed her to start thinking about what decisions she would be wanting to make. And so I don't know if there's any training for that, because I didn't even, and it turned out, 5 or 6 years later, he's my son, he's living with me, but that's one ending to a story, but that isn't necessarily how every story ends.
But
And
you're so powerful, Marty. I think they help us as those in the field think of how we can tell this story more impactful. And as you said, lived experience is one of the strongest ways to connect. So thank you for that. Janie?
Thanks. Janie Whiteford. I'm the current president of California IHSS Consumer Alliance. And I just want to say the tools that you presented were great, because I'm looking at IHSS and the opportunity that those social workers have for this huge population in our state to get those folks educated and understanding what this process should look like, and their families, because they interact in so many times with both. And I also, I'm looking at other opportunities with the independent living centers, that they have that audience that they should be educated in these issues and have it as part of their regular program to present this. And the Veterans Affairs, the VA, the opportunities that they have there. I mean, all these ones that are already established at our state level, we can utilize them to get this word out, which is so incredibly important. And I want to thank Sarah for the ableism and ageism. I'm a C6-7 quad, and I know that people always say to me, oh my God, I could never live what you're living with. And I'm thinking, my life is great, and I have no problem with my life. So that whole area there of, what people think they can deal with is huge. And I think we need to look at the medical opportunities for doctors to say, this is not the end of the world. And those of us that are in the field, just to do that constant education piece. Thanks so much for this presentation.
Thank you. Back to you, Ranjana.
Thank you, Bertha. Thank you, Dr. Personato. Wonderful discussion on the Prepare tool, and the resource is available online. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out. Moving forward in our agenda, if you could please pull the agenda up. I'm honored to introduce Supervising Deputy Attorney General Thomas Brennan from the Department of Justice, Division of Medical Fraud and Elder Abuse. Supervising Deputy Attorney General Brennan brings a wealth of experience and expertise. His leadership with the Division of Medical Fraud and Elder Abuse has been instrumental in combating fraud and the abuse of older adults and adults with disabilities across our state. Today, Supervising Deputy Attorney General Brennan will provide us with an overview of the important work that the division has been doing to protect one of our most vulnerable community members. Please join me in welcoming Supervising Deputy Attorney General Thomas Brennan.
Thank you so much for that awesome introduction. It's as if I wrote that myself. I may have, I'm not sure, but thank you for having me. And I've spoken in front of this audience a few times probably, and I try to go on talking circuits as much as possible to spread information about resources we have and about how we're in it to win it with MDT meetings and such, and outreach. And even though I don't have a presentation on a PowerPoint, I wanted to do this all verbal today. Never forget how to contact us. It's as easy as Googling DMFEA. We have a wealth of information. We have handouts. We have videos. It's covering a whole spectrum of services we provide, and we will give those free of charge. You don't know. So you can email me and I'll give you your email contact. I can send you out a bunch if you want. But what I want to discuss today, in addition to all the awesome information I've received so far and the tremendous speakers, which I always appreciate, I want to talk about a crime that is exploding in pretty much every jurisdiction of California, and that's hospice fraud. Hospice fraud does not always garner the biggest headlines. doesn't always end up on news shows or radio or print media. But take it from me, since I have my eyes on the whole state in our division, hospice fraud is a quite concerning trend, and it's very sad in many ways. First of all, it's sad on a couple fronts that I'll talk about. We all, that's right, every single one of us pay for the hospice fraud. It's part of the taxpayer burden. This isn't free money they're stealing. And when I say they, these are organized groups, a good crew. When I say good, that means a good criminal crew of hospice fraud people. You're going to have doctors on board, nurses. You're going to have what are called marketers. That's people who are going out in the street and finding seniors to hook up with hospice. It's extremely difficult to uncover. And I'll tell you why. I'll give you one case, one example. It's a case out of Los Angeles. And what the marketers did, they trolled Skid Row. Now, Skid Row is an actual known documented area in Los Angeles. It's a very sad moniker to use, but they trolled for a long period of time, a number of years, Skid Row, and they would target people who at least looked old or maybe have comorbidities or such. And they talk to them and have them, hey, sign here, and we're going to give you, and then they offer incentives. It could be bars of soap, shampoo, low value ATM cards, monetary gifts. And the people on Skid Row, oh, gladly, they sign up because they want to get, they want to have a shower maybe once a week. And you see the problem here. These people on Skid Row aren't taken into a facility. They're signed up on site. And the next thing you know, this is sad, this is an indictment on the Department of Justice for not being able to detect this kind of fraud. Some of those Skid Row persons are on hospice for in addition to 12 or north of 12 months. Now, anybody who knows hospice, you're supposed to die within a certain period of time. It's terminal care, it's palliative care. And you have a problem when doctors are recertifying persons for continued hospice care. They're lying. It's fraudulent. They're saying, oh, this is a terminal condition of, and then insert a medical condition we're all familiar with. Could be COPD, could be advanced liver failure. It's all made up to look bad and look terminal. And how do we find out about that? It's almost by happenstance. When you see an anomaly on a Medi-Cal billing or Medicaid billing, where one organization is billing an extraordinary amount of money toward hospice, then the bells go off, the red lights go off. Wow, we have it. Now, how do you prosecute a hospice case? It's very difficult because, again, the good hospice criminals shield themselves. When you have a number of doctors, they're aiding and abetting. And by law, aiding and abetting means you have the shared criminal intent with the person stealing the Medicaid money. With shared criminal intent, you encourage, promote, or facilitate the commission of the crime. So these doctors on the payroll are promoting the fraud by certifying the persons as terminal when they're really not. So if you have a number of doctors, the mastermind in the fraud scheme can say, I didn't know, I'm not a medical doctor. The doctor certified that person as terminal, shielding the real culpable person. And then the doctor will say, that's my medical judgment. I've been a doctor for 30 years. My medical judgment is that person is terminal. Do you see the problem? A lot of times it's extremely difficult to uncover. However, we are aggressively targeting it because the theft is going into the millions of dollars each big scheme. They're mainly targeting the Los Angeles area, San Diego, Riverside, West Covina, Burbank. I know this because these are some of the offices we have around the state. The good hospice thieves are going to target large population centers. We have some in Sacramento. You're not going to see hospice fraud in some of the northern rural counties, dotting half the state, because you just don't have big hospice companies. in these areas. So getting back to the fraud, this is how aggressive it goes. And that, by the way, the Skid Row in LA, that's just one case. The more common hospice fraud that's occurring right now is pretty much every day. You have unscrupulous people, we'll call them the marketers. They go to senior facilities. They'll go to facilities where they have access to. They'll put up, they'll have booths inside a facility. It's as if you're walking into the DMV and you're being, shown how to register to vote. It's this aggressive. So they'll have a booth in a senior facility. And of course, they're giving out the freebies, I call them the toys or the gifts, which you're not supposed to do, buying lunch, McDonald's, Burger King for seniors who, hey, that's good, that's good. And now here's where the patient harm comes in that really, really gets me angry, because there's an element of fraud, of course, it's financial, but when you put patient abuse and you mix patient abuse with the fraud, you're going to have my full attention. And I'm going to, gloves off, knives out, I'm quoting a movie. That means it's on. We're going after you aggressively. Do you know that when someone is eligible for hospice and they sign up with hospice, meaning they have to voluntarily sign for hospice services, the moment the hospice services take over, and this is Medicaid money, that's where we get involved, that person is ineligible for primary care that the person would normally get.
That's actually not true. That's not true.
Okay. Well, I'll take questions, I promise.
Okay. But I just want to make sure we're giving people the right, correct information and not misleading.
Oh, I don't want to, I would never mislead anybody. Don't get me wrong here. But when the person gets into hospice, let me put it this way. Many times those persons have primary care physicians, and the primary care physician has spent, insert the number, weeks, months, years caring for this person. The hospice thieves don't notify the primary care physician. They have a doctor in the employ of the hospice who will diagnose a person with a terminal illness, and the person signs up, and the primary care physician doesn't know about it until we go to the primary care physician. The best witness for a hospice case is the primary care physician, who will state, if it's a good case, no, my patient, insert patient name, is not terminal. Yes, the person is old. That doesn't mean they're dying. Yes, the person has whatever medical ailment caused the person to be with the primary care physician. However, it's not terminal. And when I say this is it's almost an epidemic of problems. When one of our, we call them sister agencies, like a Department of Healthcare Services, for instance, when they start digging around and start called sniffing around and determining and interviewing beneficiaries, interviewing the primary care physicians, building up a hospice case, oftentimes they will close shop and start up again in another venue. Usually it's in the same geographical area. They'll rename the hospice. They will keep the same people on the hospice, going way beyond what is normally the terminal condition or the terminal time limit for standard hospice, as long as they can. And so when they're bouncing around, it makes it exceedingly difficult to build a case. But when we do, we know about the money going into the millions of dollars. And it's extremely, extremely sad, because it's sad for me because we can't keep up with it. We absolutely, when the patient, we'll call it the patient or the victim, signs up for hospice, in many of these cases, they're not told what hospice is. They're not instructed that they're receiving palliative care for their terminal condition. All they know is somebody's coming to their house. Could be an apartment. It could be usually it's these are lower income people because they're on Medicaid. Maybe the hospice company, if they're smart, they're trying to give the illusion that they're caring. They'll send a representative out. It could be a CNA. It could be a LVN. It could be a nurse. In many cases, they'll go out, they'll check the vitals of the person, the blood pressure, heart rate. Maybe they'll do a medication run for the person. and I'll go pick up prescriptions for you and such. And when you think about this in economic terms, you have to ask how much value is placed on showing up at somebody's house once a week, taking their vitals, which could take as a matter of minutes, maybe going on a medication run. You're probably talking about maybe a couple $100. They're billing hospice in the thousands for the palliative care because the hospice rates of billing are so much higher than other areas of medicine. That is the incentive for people to go into hospice fraud. So it's very sad. It's very alarming. It's in every jurisdiction, but for, like I mentioned, the far northern rural counties that generally don't see hospice. But why does that impact all of us? I think the biggest takeaway from this presentation is sometimes your client, the person you're assigned to, say, for instance, an APS worker, social worker, Department of Aging, somebody that you're affiliated with, oftentimes, from what I've seen, they don't even know they're on hospice. They just signed up for it, and this company is giving them some services, but billing you, the taxpayers, for upwards of $1 million or such dollars in theft. So now getting back to, I can't remember who said they're ineligible for medical treatment. Let me open it up. I'll answer that question to the best of my ability, I promise. Let me try to rephrase that. When someone's on hospice and they're getting, for instance, let's say the hospice company is authorizing a script. It's a prescription for medication. It could be multiple different kinds of medication. Remember, by and large, the primary care physician does not know about the hospice in general. So you're going to have we'll call him a dirty hospice doctor writing scripts for medication. What happens, do you think, when a primary care physician also will write a script for medication? Do you see there's no communication? If two doctors are doing the same prescribing without communication, we have to look at a cures report to see if there's an overlap, to see if there's some type of, because if you give too much medication to somebody, that could be tragic. If you interact medications, there are some medications that don't interact well with others, there could be a problem. Because what we see is that the hospice doctors, they don't necessarily have a benevolent motive. Their motive is financial. They're not the primary care physicians. They're trying to give the illusion that they're ordering medication for this terminally ill person, but the primary care physician's in the dark. That's one of the big problems with lack of communication and taking on a custodial care issue with a senior. I don't know how to say it other than it's extremely alarming. Extremely alarming. I'm almost out of time, but I want to open up questions before I move on hospice care. If anybody's seen this, if you've experienced it, if you know about it, remember, I wish I could put this on my screen. I mentioned this at the outset. We have so much information available. We have hotlines. We have people who are, we have personnel listening to hotlines. We have email. We try to get information fresh from the streets. Information that is late, as in, 6 months, a year before we find out about it, a lot can happen in that time. Persons they can die, they can pass away. We're going to kind of lose one of the critical components of a prosecution. So if in all the awesome work you're doing, you uncover something suspicious, there is nothing wrong with calling the DMFEA here in Sacramento where I work. Let us take the information, let us probe into it, determine if something nefarious is going on, and then we have to stop it as quick as possible. If that makes sense.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think we have a few questions. Carla had her hand first. Lisa, I will then quickly take your question. Carla, go ahead.
Yeah, so thanks so much. And as someone who has been a hospice physician, I just want to provide some clarifying comments. I absolutely agree that there's a huge problem with abuse in hospice, and we know that from the number of agencies, but I don't want that to detract from the amazing work that many hospices do for people with serious illness. And we risk more people not enrolling in hospice that truly need it. So labeling hospice doctors as just being for the money is just not factually correct. And it's a little bit offensive for someone who's done this work for the right reasons. But I hear what you're saying is that not everyone's a good player. And some other additional clarifying questions is that a lot is in the nuances and details of how hospice work is. I can actually stay involved as a primary care physician. It depends on how the documentation goes. And so again, there's these nuances to not have everyone freak out about what hospice is. When it goes well, it goes very well. And then a bigger comment, which is, you know, I wrote in the chat, is that we have a fragmented primary care system and healthcare system. And often as someone who takes care of people with serious illness, hospice is often the only thing that can give people the wraparound services they need. Or if I have someone who really wants palliation but lives in assisted living or boarding care, hospice is the only way that someone will not be taken to the hospital. Ultimately, the actual criteria for someone that, yes, it's 6 months, but it's in my medical judgment, do I believe it is a greater likelihood or not that they will die? And that does give a lot of leeway to your point. It's very tricky, and there's a lot more policy discussions we should have around this.
Oh, huge. And I would never want to offend you, Carla. I love your presentation. I've heard you a couple times. Believe me, when I'm talking about a dirty hospice doctor, I'm designating that person as, oh no, that's not a benevolent doctor. That's not somebody who actually provides a good hospice care, which that is critical. I have an 83-year-old dad and an 81-year-old mom. And it's just a matter of time when somebody comes in for my dad. I know that, right? However, like Carla said, there are so many good hospices. It's a very large, thankfully, how can I say it? Not an organization. It's a group of providers because our population is aging. And when our population is aging, you're going to have more hospice companies popping up. Thank goodness there are good ones that can give us all comfort, because none of us want to put our loved one into a terrible situation with one of these, what I call non-benevolent doctors. But with that said, Carla's right. There are so many good, benevolent hospice organizations. It's just hard for us to, how can I say it? It's hard for us to get all of them. And sometimes I say, oh, those hospices, and it sounds like I'm talking about every single one of them. Trust me, I'm not. I would never do that. That's like saying all doctors are frauds when I've prosecuted two. That's crazy. I try not to paint with such a broad brush. That's a long apology, Carla, but I really mean that. I do not want to overly inflame somebody or make you think, oh my gosh, if you're considering your parents going into hospital, oh, I can't do that. What a dangerous thing. No, 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 no. There just are unscrupulous people amongst all the good providers that cause me a lot of strain. And it gets me quite angry too, not going to lie. So there's another case. This happened. I'll be real quick about this one. Yes, this is alarming. Okay. Here I say, I don't want to alarm you, but this is quite alarming. And as a supervisor, I see these cases from all over the state. And this one in particular today, I found out about it. The Bay Area was the site of this fraud. I don't exactly know what type of medical facility it was, but I know there were a lot of seniors in the care of a medical facility. That shouldn't surprise anybody. A crew, they're all gentlemen, they're all a crew of men, burglarized, very professionally burglarized a medical office and got hold of scripts and personal identifying information. Script is that's a word for a prescription. Prescription. So they have a book of scripts and they have the medical information for the seniors. And this is very cynical of me, but there are pharmacies in California, you can find them, who don't put a lot of effort into verifying the information as to who you're picking up the controlled substance for. And so they find these pharmacies and they get and these are the drugs the kids like on the streets. When I say kids, we all know what happens when you go onto social media, Snapchat, Instagram. There are other ones. You've heard about young people getting access to narcotics, and they're using the seniors' information. That's identity theft, first of all, and then selling OxyContin, oxycodone, morphine, heavy duty narcotics on social media. What do we do as prosecutors when that person's caught? The risk of a disaster is grand. How do we talk to parents who have lost kids to drug overdoses and drugs they receive from social media? This is like point center, ground zero of the problem we all know about. And we get to prosecute that, number one, because the seniors have their identity stolen. And number two, it's kind of bizarre. I'm a statutory creation. My job is based on a federal statute. We are the acronym sounds vulgar, MFUCU. It's a Medicaid Fraud Control Unit. So MFCU. As a Medicaid Fraud Control Unit with a statutory creation, there's a carve out. We also are allowed to prosecute drug diversion. Reason I'm bringing this case up to you all, they're targeting the seniors and stealing their identity. Why, you may ask, would seniors be targeted? Because look, if you steal somebody's identity who's on the grid, who's working, who's maybe middle-aged, chances of getting caught is a little bit great. Sadly, if a senior's retired, they're not working, stealing the identity, you can get away with it a little bit longer. But yes, I'm segregating the seniors from a younger population when they become victims of identity theft. So it's a two-pronged approach, and that's just a case that absolutely infuriates me again. Probably equally to the aggressive hospice fraud. So drug diversion,
Mr.
if you see it. Oh, yes. I didn't see the question.
I don't want to be disrespectful. We do have public comments as well. And Lisa Coleman had a question for you. Lisa,
Oh, yeah, go for it.
I will give up the time because I know the public wants to have time to have questions. So thank you.
And I'll stop there. I did run into my 1 minute over. I'm so sorry. I'll take questions for sure, or public comment. I think that applies to everybody.
Yes, we'll go ahead. I'll go ahead and transition over to Carol, who'll open it up for public comments. Carol.
Good morning, good afternoon, excuse me. This is our public comment period where we hear from our attendees. Please use your raised hand function in the Zoom toolbar, or if you're appearing by phone, *9, that would also raise your hand. And I see Greg DeGiere, D-E, capital G-I-E-R-E. I'm going to unmute your line. Do want to remind you 2 minutes for public comments so that we can hear from everyone. So Greg, can you unmute your line? Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Greg DeGiere. I'm the civil rights advocate of the ARC of California, a intellectual and developmental disabilities group. I was one of a small team of people who put together a letter to the administration back when they were developing the Master Plan on Aging, making a whole series of recommendations for things that should be in the plan to all having to do with senior and disability justice. The administration chose not to include them in the plan, but what they did do is kick it over to this coordinating council. I've been disappointed that, as far as I can determine, the council has not paid any attention to any of them. I know the Elder Justice Coalition also has had a blueprint that was kicked over to the council, and they've updated it and greatly expanded it since then. And Carol, you would know better than I whether you've had any success in getting attention to that. Between those two documents, even those two together are far from a comprehensive program, but there are many things in them that the state should be addressing. So I would like to ask, and I'm not sure whether this is the time to expect any answers, have all the members of the council seen those two documents that the administration kicked over to you? And whether or not that's true, how can the council take up those serious recommendations? I'm thinking one thing that stands out is financial abuse, and that stands out in my mind right now because of looking at the priorities for this year. I don't see anything on priority list that deals with that huge problem, financial abuse, both for seniors and for many people with disabilities. So how can the council start paying attention to those recommendations, either as a standalone thing or as informing their decisions on the items that are on the priority list? Can you make sure that every member gets them and looks at them, for example?
Thank you for your comment, Greg. We will look at that, and we will let the council know, but we appreciate your comment. I'm going to move on to our next public commenter, Jennifer Yoder, Y-O-D-E-R. I have unmuted your line. Can you please speak?
Hi, I'm Jennifer Yoder. I'm a senior real estate specialist here in El Dorado County. I'm certified by the National Association of Realtors. My partner and I started our business back in May of 2022. And in the last year and a half that we've been working in the senior industry, it's my eyes have become so open to so many cases of fraud, and it's so disturbing. Tommy Brennan, I would love to meet with you just as boots on the ground, some of the things I see. But three of the things I'd really like to point out is I see referral fees being paid to people that work in these senior communities for housing leads, which I think is a shame. I mean, they're technically, I think according to contract, they're not supposed to accept these referral fees, but there's people bragging about it on LinkedIn, on Facebook, and they say, oh, we're giving this community a donation, and that staff member can choose to keep their donation, or they can forward it and, you know, pay it forward to a charity. But either way, I think that's wrong. There's people that are real estate or realtors that are claiming they're senior real estate specialists with that certification from the National Association of Realtors that actually don't have it. So they're, you know, making false claims to the public. And there are investors that are not licensed. I'm a licensed agent, so I have rules and, you know, things that I need to follow. I'm regulated. These investors are not regulated, and they are paying these seniors 65 to 70 cents on the dollar for their homes. So they're robbing them of the equity that they often need to help pay for their long-term care. It's disgraceful. And then these same investors go and brag about it on LinkedIn. Oh, we gave $3,000 to this community. And there's a picture of them standing there holding this big check. And it's like, how are you even able to pay $3,000? Because you're robbing this person of their money. So you're making this huge profit. I'm an agent. I charge, you know, our fees are upfront. We review our commissions with our clients. And I help them from A to Z. Like, I've become so much more than a realtor. Like, I'm really helping these people to get the care they need. Oftentimes they can't pack their houses, so we arrange vendors for that. But I mean, we're on the up and up. I'm nominated for Startup Business of the Year in my chamber up here in El Dorado Hills.
Jennifer, I want to thank you for your comment. Your time is up, so we can move on, but we appreciate what you have commented on today. Thank you so much.
It's just so disturbing. Thank you.
Next, we have Sari Tataporan, T-A-T-P-A-P-O-R-N. I've unmuted your line. Can you go ahead?
Hello?
Hi. Yes, sorry.
Yeah.
Yes,
good
please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Okay, good afternoon. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm Sarita Popo, and I'm the president of the ABLE Community Development Foundation. We have Asian Senior Health and Wellness in Contra Costa County in the city of Richmond. And I'm senior myself in my family. I'm senior, my wife senior, my mom 85, and I have two person disability in my family. And in my immediate families, we have 6 families. We have 11 seniors. Okay, and I'm working with the Asian senior in Contra Costa County especially in the West County where there's a lot of senior. And in Asian community, based on the county plan, AAA plan, there's over 10,000 Asian senior who are medical or the food stamp recipient, which is all low income. In order to get the food stamp, they must be low income. And not only that, many of us who need lots of help, especially those who don't have the family support. They have to depend on themselves. They have to depend on their other family, their friend. And just want to bring this issue to your attention. And not only that, in Sacramento, in Stockton, there are many of us too, especially the people who, what we call refugee people from Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, from Thailand. So we need lots of help. Thank you so much.
You're muted, Carol.
Thank you. Sorry for your comment. We appreciate your being here today. Regina Brink, you have your hand up. Please go ahead. You can unmute.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you. My name is Regina Brink, and I'm the Assistant Director of Governmental Affairs for the California Council of the Blind. And these are great resources that are offered. But what we find is that too many times people with sensory disabilities, including those with hearing and vision loss, are overlooked in the planning of all of these different programs and resources. Often they're in printed formats that we can't access, or electronic formats like PDFs that may not be accessible. Not all PDFs are. They have to be made accessible at the beginning of the formatting of the document. People are unaware of how to make documents and web pages and other materials accessible. There is often no sign language available, no braille available, no person to read it. I was just handed a prescription yesterday and they said, I'm sure someone can translate it for you. Many people do not have the resources and they expect a family member or a caregiver that may not exist. A lot of times to achieve independence, people that are blind or low vision have to actually not accept the assistance of the family members because of various entanglement issues. So I'm here to say that I love these resources, but the California Council of the Blind would like to make sure that they are accessible to people in our community and people with other sensory disabilities, and that our needs are taken into account when making these plans. Too often, these plans do not include us, and such as the advanced directives, there is no ability to make them accessible. They can't be emailed to me in any accessible format or given to me in an accessible format that I can read. And I know that from personal experience that it's not available. Thank you.
Understood. Thank you so much for your comment, Regina. We appreciate that. Moving on to Bobby Blakeney. I'm going to unmute your line, Bobby. Please go ahead.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you very much for allowing me this time to speak. My name is Bobby Blakeney, and I am a AAA member for PSA 32. I'm also a volunteer HICAP counselor. I've been doing that for 10 years, and I love my volunteer job. I was also instrumental in getting the ADRC started here in Monterey County, which is in conjunction with CECL, the Central Coast Center for Independent Living. At the very beginning of this webinar, I did hear that we have a lot of good information, a lot of good resources, but it's not being disseminated. These are some resources. We have 58 counties in California. Every single county in some sort of way has an IRA, which is the information referral and assistance program within their Department of Social Services. Now, if with that, and I know that there aren't ADRCs within every county or tri-county or area where their social services are, but that would be a way to get this information out. We should be partnering with them also. And I believe also the agencies, especially when persons are applying for any type of assistance, be it Social Security, be it Medicare or Medicaid or Medi-Cal in California, that information should also be in their information packets. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bobby. I'm going to move to our last hand raised. Donata, I am unmuting your line. Can you go ahead?
Great. I just had a question. I'm not sure about the scope of this coordinating council, but I wondered if this group had any role in perhaps addressing the statewide cuts that just recently happened with our elder abuse grant from the California Office of Emergency Services. I know that it was mentioned a little earlier around the investment that the state has made into, coordinating MDTs, the multidisciplinary teams, and several counties were funded through this Cal OES grant it's called the XC grant for elder abuse. Is there anything that a coordinating council on the state level could do to, reach out to Cal OES and say that eliminating funding for elder abuse, unsuspectingly, only 12 grantees actually received their funding out of, from across the state? It just seems like the type of thing that shouldn't happen so, on such a large scale and without any planning, preparation, transition for the local communities that were funded through this program.
Thank you for your comment. We're going to turn that into a comment as opposed to a question, because we are not taking questions, but we appreciate your comment and the sentiments that you have relayed. We will take that back. So that concludes, folks, from our public comment period. I'm going to transition this back to our director, Susan DeMorris.
Great. Thank you, Carol. And thank you, everybody. This was a fantastic meeting. I learned so much from our presenters and panelists and work group chairs and Bertha as our co-chair. And I just wanted to specially thank Greg, Jennifer, Sarti, Regina, Bobby, and Donata for your public comments, for staying on until the finish and really enriching our conversation with your public comments. Bertha, is there anything that you would like to share as we wrap up the meeting and close out?
Just to build off on what you're saying, I think the public comment illustrates what we're here to do, to always make sure that we're keeping a widened perspective, different angles to further enrich with the common goal that we have. So thank you all, and thank you for such a vigorous meeting, and thank you to the CDA staff for all their time and planning and effort for this meeting.
Yes, thank you, everyone. And we'll see you next for our May meeting, May 16th. Oh, here we go. We're going to run through this slide real quickly. We are celebrating all year CDA's 50th anniversary. So if anyone would like to share a story of somebody who touched the aging network over the last 50 years, somebody who has benefited from any of the programs and services, or somebody who can help shape the future of the aging network, please email our communications at aging.ca.gov. That would be communications@aging.ca.gov. We'd love to hear from you. And then the last slide, with a minute to spare, what excellent time management, everyone. We covered a lot of ground today. We want to be sure that you have this on your calendar. Our next meeting of the Coordinating Council is May 16th, and then everyone is included, welcome and invited to the October 8th Day of Action. You can find our slides and transcript at the California Health and Human Services Agency website, and you can always reach out to us at engage@aging.ca.gov. We'd like to hear from you between meetings, as well as in meetings. So thank you all very much for your time today and for your outstanding work and advocacy every day. Bye.